Great. Today we are talking about what people are sold in property investing. Do you know that people buy and then hope and pray that one day this property is going to make money? We're going to unpack that. Here is what's wrong with buying and hoping and praying a property is going to make money.
So isn't what's wrong with actually buying and hoping? Because I think when we invest because we're saying this thing, we want it to be there for the future and. So if I'm buying a property with the hope that it's going to make money in the future, is there actually anything wrong with that? And what is actually wrong with that? Because a lot of people are sold that, especially with these new developments, that okay, buy this property and it will appreciate, and then you buy it, but at the time that you buy it, you don't even know how much you're gonna make, when are you gonna make it, what factors determine that appreciation, right? But I think before we even get to that level of detail, let's actually unpack what they mean by appreciation, right? So appreciation is when the value of the property increases over time. So we all know that, like anything else, for example, a loaf of bread cost 10 rand maybe 10, 15 years ago, and it's now towards 20 rand. That's pure inflation, right? So properties similarly will undergo a natural process of actually their value increasing in value over time. However, there are certain areas and property types where the appreciation is better than others. And there are even other areas where there's little to no appreciation at all, or very minimal. You'll find that, and this tends to happen in areas that are oversaturated.
Yeah.
You know, like Midrand, for example, North Riding, you know, areas that tend to have a lot of these flats that are densely populated. Because you'll find that a property, for example, 5 years ago was 500,000.
Yeah.
And it's now maybe similar properties are now 510, 515,000. So over 5 years, that's not really appreciation.
That's not appreciation. And there is something called depreciation as well.
Exactly.
So some areas, depending on where you have bought, can go through a depreciation. If the crime rate increases, if something changes drastically, and some depreciation is just brought by market factors that you have no control over. So buying for appreciation is possibly not a bad idea for someone who has got the luxury of cash, someone who's not looking for extra income, for someone who has got the time to wait for appreciation. But you and I didn't get into property investment because of that. We wanted cash to supplement the salaries that we get on our day jobs. So that is what the difference is. You buy for appreciation only if you have got the luxury of waiting. So if I were to buy an apartment in Cape Town, hoping that my daughter is gonna go to UCT one day, and I don't mind paying for a bond because I have got extra income to pay for a bond, and I have got extra income to pay for the property manager that will take care of that property. Absolutely, some people have got cash like that, but you and I, that's not what our mentorship is set up on.
No, exactly, Miranda. And I think it's very important that when you are investing in property, you are clear what your goal is, and you are also aware of your current situation, because a lot of people get trapped in this appreciation trap where you realize that you want to invest in property, and then an opportunity is presented to you. It's easy. Maybe it's a new development, and then they're gonna take care of it for you, and therefore you think this is the easy way, but you don't even know how much the actual rentals are going to be when this development completes, because they will sell you the projections of what they think it's going to be. And then this appreciation that they promise you, it's not guaranteed. You don't know what it's going to be, right? So this is just some of the challenges that are there when you are having an appreciation strategy and you're not even aware of the fact that doing proper calculations to say, okay, this is how much rental I'm expecting to have, I'm going to have to maintain this property, I'm going to have to pay for a property manager, and this is how much I will need to top up. They don't tell you about that. They focus on the appreciation part. So here's what's wrong with following that strategy, especially as a beginner investor, is that essentially you are subsidizing your tenant to live in a very nice area on your dime. You are paying for them to live in that property. You may have to top up from anything from 1,000 to 4,000, 5,000, even 10,000 rand if you are not careful, right? So you'll find that some of these upmarket new developments, one bedrooms are now going for close to 2 million rand. And you know that there is no way that the average South African can afford to pay around at least 20,000 rand. And even that, they're gonna break even for you for a one bedroom. How many people can afford to pay 20,000 rand for a one bedroom? So already you know that kind of property you're gonna be deep in the red, right? So here's what's wrong with that. Your tenant lives in a brand new apartment that you are now having to pay for, right? And the thing is as well is, if anything was to happen to you, say for example, you lose your job or you lose your income one way or another, not only now do you have to subsidize the initial shortfall, but now you have to cover the entire amount if the tenant moves out or if the tenant doesn't pay. So you don't want to be caught in a situation like that. So that's the thing about this appreciation strategy. And especially when you've got a single tenant that is staying in there, right? So,
and the other thing, Sli, is I have my day-to-day job and I go and buy an investment property, said investment property. And from my day-to-day job salary, I have to finance and top up this property. That's not a business. It's not a good business. You can't go into a business that is losing you cash or that requires you to input every day. And that is such a simple principle. Even the lady that's selling fat cakes at the corner knows that. She is selling fat cakes and there is some cash she's making so that she can pay fees and buy uniform for her kids. So it's not a good business to buy when you are buying a property and just waiting for appreciation, but you are financing it all the time.
yeah.
Cool.
So I think then let's have a conversation around, there is still merit, right, to having what we call equity in a property.
Yeah.
And really what, when somebody or when you're looking at a property and your goal is to benefit from the appreciation, which is basically the rise in the value of the property, is that you need to understand firstly what that is and how it's actually determined, right? Because now even if you are getting into those types of properties, at least you are aware of what it is, right?
Yeah.
So essentially what equity is the difference between what the market value, what the property is worth versus the outstanding bond.
Yeah.
So the difference between those two is equity. So the bigger the gap between those two, the better off you are. So you want to create that gap, which is the equity part, right? So when you're buying, for example, a new property, your bond is 1 million and the property is worth 1 million, which means your equity is 0 at that point in time. So over time, as the property value increases, that gap starts getting wider and wider, right? So say for example, in year one, your property, you buy it for 1 million, your bond is 1 million. But remember, you'll be paying it down and also it will be increasing. And let's say for example, after year one, you've paid, let's say 50,000, just random example. That means that now, if the market value remains exactly the same, you now have 50,000 rand worth of equity. However, if the property value has gone up by 50,000 as well, that means you now have 100,000 rand of equity. So what that means is that's money that you can essentially approach the banks and borrow against that property, because now you owe 950, it's worth 1,050,000. In fact, 1,050,000, right? So the difference between the two is equity. So now you can use that to grow your portfolio. I hope that makes sense, right? Because I know it's a lot, right? So when you're buying a property for appreciation, what you are hoping for is that that gap between your outstanding bond and the market value does this. But as we said earlier, there are no guarantees. And at the point that you buy the property, you don't know that for sure, right? So that's one way that you then create equity by creating that gap, is by paying down the bond and waiting for time so that your value of the property increases. Yeah. That's one way, but it's not the only way.
It's not the only way. And remember, Sli says you don't know how much it's going to appreciate for. Even the person that's selling you doesn't know. Believe me, they don't know. Or possibly they know, but they know that you don't know. So they sell, they sell it because you have not read the property reports, you don't know the outlook of the area, you don't know what that area is going to look like, are they going to extend the Gautrain into that area? So they are selling you something, that strategy that we call hope and pray. Appreciation is not a strategy for beginners, and that's the first thing that we teach in our mentorship. We do not let you buy a property hoping and praying that that strategy is going to make you money. So there are other ways of making sure that you have equity and you get some money out of property investing. And the second one that you have to use is buying below market value. What does that mean? Because we really want you to understand, not to use too much English. If the property is in that area, let's go back to North Riding again. So North Riding is all oversubscribed. It's got lots of 2-bedroom apartments all over the place, all over the place. All of them are priced between 640,000 to 780,000. And you find that there is a distressed seller, and they want to sell their property fast, or the bank is selling it off, and you get it at 400,000. Yeah? And the units in that estate are 640,000. And you've got 400,000, or you are able to establish a bond for 400,000. On the day that you sign, you have bought a property that is worth 650,000, but you are paying 400,000. The difference between the 250,000, you are cashing in. You have bought a property that's below market, and you can wake up, as it's being registered, you can wake up and sell it to the next person at 650,000 without blinking. You have made a profit instantly. That is a property that is below market, that gives you equity on day one, and you can sell instantly for a profit.
And the bonus is that you know exactly how much you're gonna get.
That's it.
You don't have to speculate, you don't need a crystal ball, you don't need bones, you don't need anything. You know that the properties in this particular area, 2 bedrooms, are selling for around 650,000. If I buy for 400,000, maybe I want a quick sell. Even if I sell for 600,000, I still make a 200,000 clean profit. I know exactly how much I'm gonna make the day that I buy that property. I'm not gonna hope and pray that one day I'll make money. I don't know how much it's gonna be, but I know I'll make money. You know exactly how much it's gonna be, right? So that's the important thing. So that's the one way that you make money out of equity, or at this appreciation thing. You don't have to wait for it. You know exactly how much you create it, right? By buying below market value. Speaking of creation, the other way that you can actually force appreciation or increase the equity in your property, right, is you can actually physically do some changes to the property, right? So one of the things you can do, for example, is to refurbish it. So if you refurbish a property, either maybe just making it look nicer, painting it, changing the tiles, doing something to it. It increases the rentals that you can get from it. And secondly, when you want to sell it, you can potentially sell it for more because it looks nicer than similar properties in that street or in that area. So already by doing some minor change to the property, it can actually increase its value. The second thing is you can rezone it, right? So by rezoning, for example, you may find that there are certain areas or streets that you find that maybe they were like homes before, but you find that doctors are moving in and making it like practice offices, lawyers are moving in there, they're converting them into law offices. If you find a property that's not yet zoned for business within that hub, and you zone it for business use, then automatically the value of that property increases. The other thing you can zone is for multiple residents. For example, the property comes standard for a normal family to live in, but then you go and rezone it to a res 3, which means that you can have multiple units in that particular property. That also increases the value of the property. Or you can extend it, you can add a cottage to it. All those changes increase the property. The other thing is you can change the use of the property. For an example, it was operating as a normal home. You get the consent use from the municipality, or you rezone the property, it becomes a student accommodation. All of a sudden, it's no longer a residential. Maybe you could put in one tenant for 7,000. All of a sudden, you can put in 6 tenants and they're all paying 3,000 rand. That now also increases the value of the property. And again, you're not guessing how much it is worth. You know that if I put in 6 students in and they're paying 4,000 rand each, this is how much I'm gonna get. And you know that, okay, if you speak to town planners, they're gonna give you a costing of how much does it cost to actually do a rezoning. So if you are selling it to someone else and you say this property is rezoned and I've spent X amount of money to rezone it, that person is more than willing to pay you for that and more to avoid the hassle of rezoning and starting the process from scratch. So all of those things, you know exactly how much money you're gonna make at the beginning. You're not hoping and praying and speculating about how much money you're gonna make, and you don't even know when it's gonna come.
Absolutely. So I want to add on the rezoning. So there are pieces of land and then there are pieces of land. Like people get told, buy property, buy land, no one is making more land. That's true, but not all pieces of land are equal. So I'll tell you a story of a group of doctors that bought a pieces of land somewhere in Leidenberg, but they paid a premium because that area is being rezoned for commercial use, number one, but the piece of land that they have bought has got a hospital zoning. That is like a super duper what people want, and they paid a premium for it. They paid over R1 million to have it rezoned, because for you to build a hospital in a certain piece of land, you need access to water, the sewerage has to be a particular way, and access pathways to get to that hospital. So they have paid a lot of money, R1 million, and that piece of land on its own is worth over 6 million rand, and it's quite a big piece of land. So now they are unable to build the hospital because the group has broken apart, the relationships have been strained. They are selling the piece of property, and indeed they will get some 6 million or 7 million rand. That is what we are talking about rezoning. So rezoning, you can rezone for multiple residential use, you can rezone and repurpose for commercial use, you can rezone for hospital. Those are called specialist facilities or something like that, because hospitals have got a certain way that they have to function, and because they also generate a certain type of waste, so they can't be placed anywhere in between houses or something like that. And that rezoning is specialized and it's quite expensive. So think about it. Equity is formed by many things, and appreciating a piece of property or a piece of land is a specialized thing, and it really gives you some value on a piece of land.
But I think the important thing here to mention is, if you're just going to go in it blindly, you may find yourself getting burnt, and then you have a challenge with the person who sold you the property, or creates certain animosity. All because now what you land up with the property isn't what you get, because they estimated, oh, this area is going to give you 5%, 10% per annum growth, and then it doesn't happen. So whereas if you take matters within your control, and you say, if I want to create equity, I want to know how much am I going to make, then that's when you then look at, how do I buy below market value, or how do I repurpose the property to be able to create that value. And these things require that you gather the relevant knowledge, and you know what you're doing, and you've got the relevant power team members to assist you in that, because just going in it blindly, you're going to find yourselves making a lot of costly mistakes that will cost you a lot in the long run. So that's why the mentorship is there. Really, it's to help with unpacking some of these things, to be able to guide you along the way, because some of these we may have done ourselves, or we know people who have done them, and we may be able to then guide you in terms of how do you actually invest. But ideally, you want to be able to invest for cash flow purposes. But if you are looking at investing for equity, these are the things that you need to bear in mind. And it's not to say that these two things can't coexist either. You can absolutely do that. But for you as an investor, especially as a beginner investor, to just buy a property and hope and pray for a miracle, you really will be doing yourself a disservice. So now that we've had these insightful conversations, and we want to be able to bring this to more people, right? So the best way to find out more about, the programs that we run, our workshops, we've got live events that we do, and we also have a mentorship program. Please subscribe to our mailing list. The list will be the link will be in the description below. And if you want to get more videos like these, we'll be sharing more over the next couple of weeks. Please make sure that you subscribe to our channel and switch on the notification button.